Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about overthinking your single joint exercises. And I think this is something that people have a really bad habit of, and I want to make a few things clear on this because people do this, influencers do this, even coaches and people who write articles and stuff do this. They make a really big deal about form and things on single joint exercises, or that you need this exact perfect movement. And the reality is, and people don't like it when you say this for some reason, but single joint exercises just aren't that important. Now, does that mean that they're so not important that we shouldn't do them? No, of course not. I do them. My clients do them. All this stuff in the background is going to be like 3 of my clients doing single joint movements and then me doing single joint movements. We do them. Even my power lifters do some single joint movements, okay? So I'm not saying that they're silly or pointless. I'm saying that they are a lot less important than people make them out to be. And they contribute a hell of a lot less to your overall growth than people seem to think that they do. And that's proven by the data. Okay? Just because you see a study saying that curls produce slightly more muscle growth in the bicep than, say, a dumbbell row, which is what the studies show, like actual hypertrophy studies. Okay? That doesn't mean that the dumbbell rows don't contribute to a good chunk of our bicep size. And the same thing is true of all of our movements. Okay? Our primary growth stimulus is always going to come from the big movements. Then you'll get people who say, well, I do mostly small movements, don't do many of these big exercises. And it's like, well, you're probably not that big then. Truth be told, you're probably really small. Unless you use a lot of gear. But you need to be clear in that case, it's the drugs, not the single joint exercises. So what is the purpose of our single joint exercises? Just to fill in the gaps. Okay, that is what they're for. And those gaps can be performance-wise, or they can be aesthetically. It can be whatever gaps you're trying to fill in. Okay, and I'm not telling you what you need to pick there, right? I'm a strength coach. I'm a power lifter. I'm a strength athlete. So, most of my exercise choices are going to be geared around that. Maybe that's not what your goal is. Maybe your goal is chasing a look. But either way, the reality is the same. They're there to fill in the gaps. The big exercises will put 90% of your muscle on. Okay? If your training is good and programmed correctly, 90+% of the muscle that you gain will come from your big movements. They have the best exercise economy, right? And we're all doing them. Well, we better all be doing them. So if you're doing your big movements, that is the vast majority of your growth. Okay, so therefore that's what we're periodizing. That's what we're putting our thought into. This is what we should be putting our efforts into. It's you always hear people give that 90-10 rule. I think this applies with the single joint stuff. That people will put 90% of their thought and effort into things that give 10% of their results. Well, the reality is all your big exercises, and I'm not going to name what they are, obviously, squat, bench, and deadlift variations, and then back work for, power lifters is going to be our big movements. That might not be your specific big movements, and that's okay. I'm not telling you have to do this. I think it would be a good idea if everyone did those things. I think it would be a good idea, but I'm not saying that you have to. Okay. So context there. And that's where we get our size. It's where we get most of it. It's where we get almost all of our strength. We get most of our size, 90%, ballpark. I could be off a few percentages. But I would guarantee it's close to 90%. The smaller stuff that we're doing, we're coming in behind it, finishing things off. And I'm a big advocate for that. I tell a lot of people out there, especially drug-free guys, if you're trying to look like you're really big, come in and run a really good strength program and, do some pump work for the smaller show muscles. The muscles that you have lagging for a little bit from it, go do some pump work for those. And yes, I'll tell them, do pump work. I don't care if it's a bodybuilder term, care if it's bro, get in and do some pump work. You see my lifters all here they're all doing some side laterals, right? Lateral raises. Cables with dumbbells, whatever. And that's the point. Notice I said whatever. Why? Because it doesn't matter. Okay? What are we trying to do with these single joint movements? We're trying to get a pump. We are trying to maybe hit some part of the muscle that didn't get fully worked with the big movement. That's it. That's what we're doing. We're saying, hey, there's some part of this muscle, whether it's a bicep, a forearm, part of your delt, your tricep, your pec, your hamstring. Okay? You're trying to say, okay, I've worked this muscle with big exercises, but I think there's some areas of it or a function or some muscle fibers that need a little more work, a little more fatigue, because there's a little more growth in them that I'd like to get. That's it. That's what we're doing. All right, accordingly, you don't need to put a lot of thought into that. Do you really think there's going to be a significant difference in your delts because you chose to use a dumbbell versus a cable for your lateral raise? Like, do you biomechanically looking at it really think that? If you do, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you've bought into some weird Kool-Aid. Okay, you've bought into some bullshit. You're not going to see a difference. And if you do, it's just for you as a person, maybe. Maybe your form is just so terrible with one versus the other that you're not really engaging the muscles you want. Okay, maybe just use better form. But that's the other thing too. You really think the form is that important? Unless it is so horrifically bad that you're not putting tension on the muscle. And yes, I've seen people curl that way. We all have. Do you really think a really strict versus a looser form really is going to matter as long as a pump is achieved, fatigue is achieved in the muscle, you've recruited muscle fibers? You think it matters that much? I don't think it does. I don't think it does. You know what our biggest concern should be with picking these movements? Do they hurt us or not? Do they cause inflammation or pain that we don't want, like an undesirable amount that's not a training response like DOMS or something, or just an intense pump? Well, that's the only thought we should be having with most of them. We're looking at them going, or they may be adding a function or something that we're not getting with a big movement. Okay, if they do, even if they don't, it's still working that muscle. Okay, that's still probably fine. You get a really good pump and get some fatigue in that muscle that you think needs a little more work, right? Because it's not getting fully developed from the bigger movement. You're probably good. As long as you're probably getting a good pump in it and some fatigue after the other heavier work. You're almost certainly getting the desired benefits as long as you can recover from it, as long as you're not overtraining it. Okay, so outside of that, our only concern with most of these should be, do they hurt? Are they causing a tendon to get inflamed? Or are they causing a joint to be inflamed because of either the way that we're performing them or our structure and our individual biomechanics being affected by this movement in a way that's causing harm? Outside of that, stop thinking about it so much. Stop trying to periodize them. Stop trying to say, well, if I do these super slow negatives or try this modality or that, this rest pause. No, you don't need complexity. Just get a pump. That's it. Save the thinking for your big movements. You're just finishing a muscle off. That's all we're doing. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.